Hello, patriots, praying citizens, and truth seekers. Today is Monday, October 7th, 2019. Have I got a report for you? We're going to be looking at the Q posts. That's why I call this queued up, because Burisma and Biden, small potatoes, we're just getting started. We're going to look at quite a few interesting things. For example, the fact that Mr. Hussein is in for a bumpy ride ahead. How do we know that? Well, we know because we're winning. Twitter is trying to suppress huge portions of the truth, and it just means that they're trying to dam up something that is going to surpass the capacity of the dam, overflow, break it down, and carry the mainstream media with it. We'll be talking about billions of our tax dollars that went to Ukraine and then suddenly went missing. A Ukraine specialist and head of the inspectors general. His name is Robert Storch. Q told us about him. He's already at work, and he's been at work for a while, so that is part of what's happening under the scenes. And then we'll also take a minute to look at President Trump's pullout of Turkey. And then we have to look at this. Is HRC going to be the candidate in 2020? But before we do that, I just want to tell you all I was gone for a few days up in the North Georgia mountains. Things were so beautiful. We went to Tennessee, North Carolina, and everything looks great. People are buying and selling, eating and enjoying the good life. But you don't see the cracks in our society, not like you do in Pelosi, San Francisco, Schiff's, Los Angeles, or Elijah Cummings, Baltimore, where homelessness is rampant. Some of the homeless are those who never recovered after the crash of 2008. Why? Well, people borrowed up to their limits and lost everything. And the same signs of a coming crash are here today. Car loans are at an all-time high. Credit cards are getting maxed out. House prices and mortgage lending are sky high in many places. And the stock market is way overvalued. We're not going to want the next one to take our savings with it. And that's why it's time to put a precious metals safety net of gold or silver under your savings to protect them. Gold and silver are low-risk assets, and you can cash them out again when the danger has passed. Talk to one of the specialists over at Noble Gold today. Click on the link below to get the free gold guide, or call 877-646-5347, or you can go to noblegoldinvestments.com. Now, the man of the hour that we want to talk about is Mr. Robert Storch. Let's review some of these Q posts. Last September, back in 2018, post number 2211, new player on the chessboard, Robert Storch, NSA Inspector General. He is chairman of the Council of the Inspector Generals on Integrity and Efficiency. Is his background important? Prior to joining NSA, Mr. Storch served in several positions at the Department of Justice's OIG, including as senior counsel to the IG and acting deputy IG, prior to his 2015 appointment as deputy IG. He also served as chairman of the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, or the CIGIE, the Whistleblower Ombudsman Working Group, the Whistleblower Ombudsman The whistleblower program he helped establish is widely seen as a leader in the field. Early in his career, Mr. Storch also worked as a federal prosecutor in the Northern District of New York, most recently serving as a deputy criminal chief and counsel to the U.S. Attorney. He was also posted overseas for 2 years as a Department of Justice resident legal advisor in, where, you guessed it, Ukraine. Vehicle for, now this is Q's note, vehicle for cross-sharing of department-to-department info re Inspector Generals, Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency. The CIGIE is comprised of all inspectors general whose offices are established under Section 2 or Section 8G of the Inspector General Act of 1978. those that are presidentially appointed / Senate confirmed, and those that are appointed by agency heads, designated federal entities. How might this benefit possible ongoing investigations across inter and intra-federal agencies? Huber, Horowitz, Storch, U.S. Attorney, Prosecutor, DOJ / FBI, Inspector General, Investigator, Signals Intelligence, and Information Assurance Products and Services. This guy is head of it all. And what does he have the inside scoop on? Perhaps the most corrupt country in Europe, which is Ukraine. Now, continuing on to the next post, which was 3324 from April 25th of this year. This is an opinion piece, How the Obama White House Engaged Ukraine to Give Russia Collusion. And Q writes, Hussein. Just some parts of this article. The January 2016 gathering. Okay, now we're going to get into this gathering. This is a meeting that Hussein convened, and there were multiple participants that confirmed it. It included some of Ukraine's top corruption prosecutors and investigators, bringing them face to face with members of former President Obama's National Security Council, the FBI, the State Department, and the Department of Justice. When? January 2016, when the campaigning was getting under full swing. They had an interest in reviving a closed investigation into payments to the U.S. from Ukraine's Russia-backed Party of Regions. That 2014 investigation was led by the FBI and focused heavily on GOP lobbyist Paul Manafort, whose firm long had been tied to Trump through his partner and pal, Roger Stone. Now, Ukraine's chief anti-corruption prosecutor told John Solomon he attended some but not all of those meetings and couldn't remember the specific cases, but he said he soon saw evidence in Ukraine of political meddling in the U.S. election. The key evidence against Manafort, which is the Black Ledger, which showed payments from the Party of Regions, was known to Ukrainian authorities since 2014, but was suddenly released in May of 2016 by this friendly group, friendly to Obama. It's called the NABU, the Anti-Corruption Bureau, after Manafort was named Trump's campaign chairman. And this is a quote from this Ukrainian. Somebody kept this Black Ledger secret for 2 years and then showed it to the public and the U.S. media. It was extremely suspicious. Now we're going to get into more of that in just a minute. Another John Solomon article, Ukraine opens probe into foreign effort to influence U.S. election to help Hillary. Now this is where we're getting with all of this, and who's behind it but Hussein. Now that's the John Solomon Twitter account here, and then underneath is another link to a Fox News article. Hussein White House counsel faces possible prosecution in Mueller-initiated probe, and it's against Greg Craig, who was an Obama official, and it's for foreign lobbying, the Registration Act. He violated it. Now I think recently it came out that they released him from all charges. And here's what Q said. Now this is from March. Numbers do not always equate to days. The face of a watch clock has multiple versions. Incorrect interpretations, pushed as statements of fact, often lead to pitfalls, stranglehold, choke tactic used by attackers. Increase in attacks, deplatform, shill infiltration, MSM/fake MAGA direct, links to terrorism, acts of violence only demonstrates validity and close proximity to justice and pain. Now let's get into some more recent things. Now this is from Brad Parscale. He is Donald Trump's campaign manager. And he's pointing some things out that this is the stuff that's out there, but we're going to get into some deeper things. But I wanted to show you this. He says, timeline. Biden says Ukraine should produce more gas. April 16th, Devin Archer visits Biden in the White House. April 18th, Hunter Biden joins Burisma. April 21st, Joe Biden promised our taxpayer money to Ukraine for the gas industry. And then he says if you replace this with Trump's, the media would lose it. And then he gives us this Washington Post, a part of an article. Burisma also began emphasizing that its gas production would reduce Ukraine's reliance on Russian energy, an argument that appealed to Washington, where the company began donating to the think tank, the Atlantic Council. Now, this is going to come back into play in just a minute. But as an aside, Patrick Howley writes, low energy. Jeb Bush's cousin, John Ellis, is partners at Sands Hill Partners with David Strawn of Escondido, California. Strawn is the official listed manager of Viscoil Holdings, the Paul Pelosi Jr. company that does business in Ukraine. So we have the Pelosi's, the Bidens, the Bushes, and also Mitt Romney has some connections to dealings in Ukraine. What a cesspool. Now, this was also part of the Brad Parscale Twitter post. He says Adam Schiff sent House Intel staffers, including this guy named Thomas Eager, to Ukraine August 24th through the 31st. And here is part of this official document about Thomas Eager traveling. The destination is Ukraine, and who's paying for it? The Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Why? They're going to have meetings and visits with government officials, party officials, civil society, and private sector reps to learn about ongoing political and military issues, including conflict in the East. Now, this was 12 days after Schiff crafted the whistleblower complaint. The trip was paid for by the Atlantic Council, which is, now here come the names, backed by Burisma. The council is also financed by Google Capital, George Soros's Open Society Foundations, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and the U.S. State Department. Google Capital led a $100 million funding drive that financed CrowdStrike. Remember, CrowdStrike is the organization that was brought in instead of the FBI to look at the DNC servers and report on the quote-unquote hack. Google Capital, now called Capital G, is an arm of Alphabet Inc., Google's parent company. Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Alphabet, remember, wore a staff badge to Hillary's campaign event saying that he was part of the staff of her campaign. So there's nothing there, right? Nothing to look at. Then Brad Parscale writes about Glenn Beck. You may have watched it. You may have wanted to watch it. It's pretty long. He does a 2-hour presentation. I think there's also a 54-minute presentation out there on all of this Ukraine stuff. I like to think that I can take some of these things and boil it down for people that don't have time to watch it, or perhaps you miss some things in the middle. I had to watch it a couple of times to catch all the different pieces. So Brad Parscale tweets about it and says, investigate. Glenn Beck nails it. The fake news media wants to ignore this. If anything close to this existed against the GOP, it would play 24/7 on every channel. He breaks down the origin of it all and the real collusion against President Trump. And then he says, my average tweet gets 250 to 400,000 impressions. A great tweet gets 1 million. This tweet has 40,000, the lowest of any tweet since I became campaign manager, almost. Cards are so stacked against us. You won't stop me from getting this out, libs. And then what he says about all of this is that he got less than 4 impressions per retweet. So here is where the mainstream media has nothing left. When somebody like Glenn Beck gets his I was going to call it a billboard, it's really pretty much a billboard, he gets his chalkboard out there and he starts to draw lines, put pictures together, put timelines together, and we get a great synopsis, summary of the complete corruption and criminality in the D Party, especially the Hussein administration. They can't fight it with the truth because they run with lies, so they have to squash any old way they can. And right now, you are not seeing any of this stuff in the mainstream media. So I wonder, how long do you think it's going to be before they have to break down and start reporting on it? So let me take you through some of the stuff that Glenn Beck talks about. Well, first of all, he tweets, "I just don't think I can take it. The press accuses Trump of exactly what we have shown through documentation and affidavits what the DNC/NGOs and the Bidens were doing. This has got to be exposed. There is no republic if the press is this in the bag." And then here's his chalkboard presentation. And Brad Parscale writes, "This appears that Glenn Beck's website URL is causing a conversation quality conversion, which means impressions are not being shown on those links one step within those that follow me. So impressions are only within my followers. Twitter doesn't want this to go viral." So let's dig in. The Blaze released an audio recording. Now this is kind of a summary of the high points, and then we'll get into the deeper issues. The Blaze released an audio recording that they recently obtained that appears to show Artem Sintik, director of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. Remember, we talked about it. That was the group that Obama brought to his office. They admitted in this audio recording, this guy Sintik, that he tried to boost the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton by sabotaging then-candidate Donald Trump's campaign. The connection between the DNC and the Ukrainian government was veteran Democrat operative Alexandra Chalupa, who happens to be the daughter of a Ukrainian immigrant. She worked in the White House Office of Public Liaison during the Clinton administration. She went to work for the DNC and the Ukrainian embassy in the U.S. She focused on fingering Manafort. Why? Because he was Donald Trump's campaign manager. Just one of several campaign advisors or lobbyists in the Ukraine, that she picks on him and leaves people like Tony Podesta, who are doing the same thing, out of the picture. Chalupa worked on getting the DNC a Russian connection to Trump, while Hussein invited Ukraine prosecutors, police, and anti-corruption groups to the White House, saying the U.S. would aid them in what they were doing, but also told them who they could investigate and who they couldn't investigate. Now, Chalupa's working her side of the deal. She speaks to a group of journalists, including Michael Isikoff, who was used very early on to plant the story of the Steele dossier in the mainstream media. And she speaks to him. She gives him the Steele dossier. It's picked up by the FBI through Nellie and Bruce Orr, and her participation in this was exposed in some emails that were published by WikiLeaks. All right, so when Hussein brings these people into the meeting, they're talking about two issues, Biden and Hunter and Paul Manafort. But they were given a clear message by Hussein to only investigate Manafort. Magically, something called a black ledger is released to the public exposing Manafort, and at the same time, Viktor Shokin, who is a prosecutor trying to get to the bottom of some of the corruption in Ukraine, is fired because if Joe Biden is correct, and as he bragged, he told the president of Ukraine that if they wanted to keep some loan money from the U.S., I think it was $1.5 billion. It all runs together. But anyway, told him that if they wanted to have that loan backed by the U.S., then Shokin had to be fired, which he was. So Shokin gives a sworn affidavit saying that Biden did actually get him fired through the president, Petro Poroshenko, in order to protect Burisma Holdings, and Hunter Biden. He was also investigating anti-corruption, this group, that Anti-Corruption Center for embezzling U.S. aid funds. So there's all kinds of money going in, and I think that's State Department funds. It's all going into Ukraine. He's looking into the bottom of the fact that there's a bunch of money missing, and he gets fired. So Glenn Beck's point in all of this is that much worse than the Biden issue is the problem of what happened to this U.S.-backed $1.8 billion loan, that the money was put in a corrupt oligarch's bank and then the money went missing. Plus, he says another $2.2 million went missing. So here's an article now. Okay, this is full disclosure here. This is Sputnik. You know, we can trust them only so far, but this stuff is confirmed. This is from August of 2015. Investigative reporters have discovered that IMF bailout funds intended for Ukraine have mysteriously found their way to a Cyprus bank account controlled by notorious Ukrainian oligarch, I can't pronounce his name, Ior Kolomyovsky. A huge chunk of the $17 billion in bailout money the IMF granted to Ukraine in April of 2014 has been discovered in a bank account in Cyprus controlled by this exiled Ukrainian oligarch. And this is according to a German newspaper. So in April of 2014, $3.2 billion was immediately dispersed to Ukraine. Over the following 5 months, another $4.5 billion was dispersed to the Ukrainian central bank in order to stabilize the country's financial system. And what kind of bank is Ukrainian central bank? It's a Rothschild bank, as Q has told us. And then he says here, or this report says, the racket executed by the private bank of this oligarch was uncovered by the Ukrainian anti-corruption initiative called Nashi Groshi, meaning our money in Ukrainian. According to Nashi Groshi's investigations, private bank has connections to 42 Ukrainian companies, which are owned by another 54 offshore companies based in the Caribbean, U.S., and Cyprus. These companies took out loans from private bank totaling $1.8 billion. So here's a little bit more on this recorded conversation, which Glenn Beck makes a great point. It's been out there and it's never been translated. So he got the translation. He put it here on his screen, and I pulled out what I thought were the most important points. So this is a recording of a Ukrainian man named Sitnik. He's caught on tape asking or bragging about how he can help Hillary get elected. He says, Hillary, I helped her. Hillary is better for us. Trump is better for the Americans. And then he says, you see why Hillary lost the election? I was in charge of the investigation of their black accounting records. We made Manafort's data available to the general public. It matters because he was Trump's campaign manager. Then he was dismissed due to black accounting and sentenced to 80 years in prison. And if there's ever a travesty of justice, it's that Paul Manafort, who they found guilty of financial misdeeds, gets an 80-year sentence, and they let, murderers go after just a few years. Obviously, he made a lot of very dangerous enemies. Now, part of the story is this gal, Marie Yovanovitch. She was the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine until May of 2019. And this is a slide I pulled from one of my previous videos. And here she is with Kurt Volker, who I've said before, I believe is he's operating for the White Hats now because he was a bigwig with the McCain Institute, and he resigned as special envoy to Ukraine a couple weeks back, and he gave a testimony before Adam Schiff's committee, and he backed up President Trump in everything he said about the phone call with Zelensky, that there was no quid pro quo in the phone call. So the black ledger, or the black accounting as Sintic called it, refers to financial records kept and used for under-the-table payments. It was put together by Sintic and a guy named Lutsenko, and both of them later went to court and were convicted for election interference. The Black Ledger was released by the Anti-Corruption Bureau in the midst of the 2016 campaign, and they gave the information to the FBI in order to get Paul Manafort in trouble. And remember that Manafort is caught, and people like Tony Podesta are not, although Podesta closed up his very big, influential lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. around the same time. Podesta was also, according to Beck, was also involved in the Black Ledger. Now, Alexandra Chalupa, her connections with the DNC and the Ukrainian embassy, she was working all this in order to get Manafort caught, which she was successful in doing. So if you want to know who else might be very worried right now, it would be Alexandra Chalupa and this ambassador, this Marie Yovanovitch, however she pronounces her name, because she was made a U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, and she gave the new prosecutor that was hired a list of people who he could not prosecute, including Burisma, the Anti-Corruption Center, George Soros, and then some other unnamed Ukrainian citizens. So she's working it through Ukraine, protecting Hussein's people, and then you've got Chalupa working to nab Manafort and make Trump look dirty. And also, Glenn Beck brought out that starting in 2018, Yovanovitch denied Ukrainian officials visas to enter the United States. And I looked it up, and she did do that indeed, although I think he had the wrong year down. But anyway, so starting in 2018, she denied them visas to enter the U.S. because they wanted to hand over evidence of Obama administration officials, their crimes, and they wanted to give it to the Trump administration, so she denied their visas so that they couldn't come over here and do it. But you know how it works. The airplanes work both ways, and now we have Trump administration officials in Europe, possibly in Ukraine, gathering information that she tried to keep out of our hands. So now, this is a summary of the things that she prevented being investigated. The DNC working with Ukraine to gather dirt on President Trump. The misappropriation of $7 billion of U.S. tax money. Ukrainian officials admitting to influencing the U.S. election. Records of Burisma officials sending $3 million to Hunter Biden. The pressure to fire Shokin that came from Joe Biden, and U.S. officials interfering in prosecution of cases in Ukraine. Do you see? This thing is gigantic. All right, so we'll take a break from that. That pretty much sums up everything that Glenn Beck talks about. I'll put links to his 2 videos in the description box so that if you have time, you can watch them. Donald Trump wrote yesterday, Nancy Pelosi knew of all of the many shifty Adam Schiff lies and massive frauds perpetrated upon Congress and the American people in the form of a fraudulent speech knowingly delivered as a ruthless con and the illegal meetings with the highly partisan whistleblower and lawyer. This makes nervous Nancy every bit as guilty as little Adam Schiff for high crimes and misdemeanors and even treason. I guess that means that they, along with all of those that evilly colluded with them, must all be immediately impeached. Now let's talk about Turkey and what is going on there. Basically, Turkey is invading northern Syria, and President Trump is keeping us out of it. So, of course, the warmongers are outraged, and families of soldiers perhaps are thinking differently, and the soldiers themselves fighting in these foreign wars for what? So, this came out yesterday from Zero Hedge, and so this gives us a little background on what was going on. Turkish President Erdogan threatened this weekend to initiate a military incursion into northeast Syria, where U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, are based and bolstered locally by a small number of American bases, saying an offensive both on land and air would come as soon as today or tomorrow. Trump and Erdogan held a last-minute phone call on Sunday where it appears the two leaders came to some level of an understanding. They discussed Turkey's proposed safe zone east of the Euphrates in Syria, which Erdogan has long urged a resistant Washington to cooperate militarily on. And though exact details of the exchange weren't published, they agreed to meet in Washington next month upon Trump's invitation. A little bit more of the situation there. U.S.-backed Kurdish forces said American troops began pulling back Monday from positions along the border in northeast Syria ahead of an expected Turkish invasion. Syrian Kurdish fighters also accused Washington of failing to abide by its commitments to its key allies in the fight against ISIS. It's a major shift in U.S. policy. Erdogan, however, also said American troops have started withdrawing from positions, and a video posted by a Kurdish news agency showed a convoy of American armored vehicles apparently heading away from the border area of Tal Abyad. Erdogan spoke hours after the White House said U.S. forces in northeastern Syria will move aside and clear the way for an expected Turkish assault, essentially abandoning Kurdish fighters who fought alongside American forces in the years-long battle to defeat the Islamic State group. Erdogan didn't elaborate on the planned Turkish incursion, but said Turkey was determined to halt what it perceives as threats from the Syrian Kurdish fighters. And here is the report that came from military.com. And of course, they were not too happy about it in the report, and there were lots of people responding to this tweet. I don't know if they were plants, but they were pretty much flipping out about this. We have Nikki Haley flipping out, Lindsey Graham flipping out, and as a former Army mom, I'm just glad that the troops will come home and let these people fight their own battles. Donald Trump writes, as I have stated strongly before, and just to reiterate, if Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. I've done before. They must, with Europe and others, watch over the captured ISIS fighters and families. The U.S. has done far more than anyone could have ever expected, including the capture of 100% of the ISIS caliphate. It's time now for others in the region, some of great wealth, to protect their own territory. The USA is great. So here are some comments under that the president put on his Twitter feed. Mike writes, we aligned under Obama not with the Kurds, but with the PKK, the sworn enemy of the Turkish Republic, our ally. We were sowing the seeds of a Turkish PKK war with that policy. We were also driving Turkey toward Russia. Another person writes, how does this end? The Kurds, whatever their political panjandrums, have been reliable allies. I note we come to the 100th anniversary of this Severus Treaty next year, in which the Kurds were promised a plebiscite. Hugh Hewitt writes, Turkey can't want a war with Kurds, but if it does, we can't be killing Turks with Americans throughout Turkey, our base there. Some will cast any deal with Turkey as President Trump getting close with a dictator. It's not. It's dealing with the realities that we can't stay forever. Now, we also had this coming out today. A New York judge says that 8 years' worth of POTUS's personal and corporate tax returns have to be turned over to a Manhattan DA. He denied Trump's argument that sitting presidents are exempt from criminal investigations. because of the Constitution. This comes amid an investigation on whether Trump and his company broke state laws when Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer, made payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. Congressional Democrats also subpoenaed Trump's tax returns. They requested 6 years of his tax returns from the Treasury Department and financial records from various companies, including Trump's accounting firm. The president has fought back in court against releasing the information, but he said on September 9th that he plans to release a detailed financial report before the 2020 election. So here's just an image of his appeal. And then this was out today. Representative Omar files for divorce. We know that she has been accused of marrying her brother in order to provide asylum for him here in the United States. And she has had several marriages. She's wanting a divorce from this husband because she's carrying on with a campaign advisor. And Stephen Miller writes, oh, so she's finally free to see other siblings now. So, it's funny. Now, here's Malik Obama, and he is, I believe, he is purported to be Hussein's brother, whatever. He writes, the Democratic ticket in 2020, folks. And then we had breaking news, Hillary Clinton thinking about running for president in 2020, according to multiple sources. Okay, I have questions like, okay, which of her stand-ins is going to actually be on the campaign trail? Because we know Hillary is really not physically capable of being on the campaign trail, let alone doing the job, let alone the fact that Americans certainly by now have had enough of her. But because Joe Biden, his position is looking pretty dicey and there's nobody else in the party that looks very good, perhaps they're pulling Hillary out of mothballs and they're going to put her out there. Now, I found this. I have been waiting to give you this report, but it's just there's been so much news. I haven't had time. And so let me do it now. Border Patrol agents will soon have the ability to collect DNA samples of migrants apprehended at the border, according to DHS. Remember, they did a pilot program that tested family relations, and now the program will be able to identify migrants via DNA testing. Why? Because there are a bunch of people who are frauds, and many migrants are bringing unrelated children and infants along with them in order to be part of the program where they're caught and released into the interior of the United States without really having any relationship with the child that they come with, and who knows what happens to those children. Now, Operation Double Helix 1.0 was the pilot program, and it found that 16 out of 84 families were frauds. The second phase found 79 out of 522 families were frauds. They uncovered 316 fraudulent families within 2 months and 599 bogus documents. Agents presented 629 different people to the Department of Justice for various criminal violations. So bravo, DHS, for implementing that. And now we are going to be exempted from paying for their health care, which is very interesting. The president signed a proclamation on Friday to protect Americans from being forced to subsidize the health care costs of legal immigrants wanting to permanently resettle in the U.S. So this new rule begins November 3rd, and it says that foreign nationals applying for visas, not including refugees, asylees, or those on non-immigrant visas, will have to prove that they will have either employer-based health insurance before arriving here or a non-subsidized private health insurance plan. And this is from a statement from the president. While our healthcare system grapples with the challenges caused by uncompensated care, the U.S. government is making the problem worse by admitting thousands of aliens who have not demonstrated any ability to pay for their health care. Notably, data shows that lawful immigrants are about 3 times more likely than U.S. citizens to lack health insurance. And immigrants who enter this country should not further saddle our healthcare system and subsequently us taxpayers with higher costs. The costs associated with this care are passed on to the American people in the form of higher taxes, higher premiums, higher fees for medical services. In total, uncompensated care costs have exceeded $35 billion in each of the last 10 years, or $7 million on average for each hospital in the U.S., and that can drive them into insolvency. Bravo, Mr. President. And this rule comes as Trump announced a plan in August that bans welfare-dependent immigrants from permanently resettling in the U.S. as they are a net burn to taxpayers. So currently there's an estimated record high of 44.5 million foreign-born residents living in the U.S. That's nearly quadruple the immigrant population in 2000. All right, now some really good news. That was good. This is even better. The unemployment rate is at 3.5%, a 50-year low. Ivanka Trump writes, while largely overlooked last month, the Census Bureau released its annual report on income in the USA, and inequality declined. The share of the income pie rose for the bottom 3 quintiles, with the biggest rise in the second quintile from the bottom, which is working class Americans. So that's good news. And then Donald Trump tweeted, Heritage Foundation, these numbers are blockbusters. Just since Donald Trump took office, median family incomes are up over $4,100. In 8 years under President Obama, they only went up $1,000. In 1/3 the time, Trump has increased incomes 4 times as much, and that doesn't even include the almost $2,000 that the families got from the Trump tax cut, according to Stephen Moore at FreedomWorks. That means $5,000 to $6,000 more in disposable yearly income that Americans have right now because of President Trump. Guys, that's it for this report, and I want to just pray for anyone who wants to hang around. I had great news from a doctor today, and I want to pray that you receive great news as well. Father, I just ask that anyone who's suffering right now, you would relieve their suffering. You would take away the pain. You would remove the tumors. You would restore anything that needs restoration. I pray for creative miracles, Father, and I pray for a sense of peace, that our bodies would be in homeostasis, operating just the way you intended. Father, we know that sometimes disease can bring us closer to you. Even though disease comes from the enemy, you will use whatever the enemy sends our way in order to better us, to mature us, to grow us up. And also, Father, if we will just draw near to you, you will draw near to us. So even in disease and discomfort, we draw near to you. And Jesus said that by his stripes we are healed, and by leaning into him and that relationship with him and cleaning up our lives and just repenting for those things which we have participated with that are not for our benefit or for your glory. If we do those things, Father, that you will use every last thing for our good. So I just lift up all those who are sick, all those who grieve from the loss of loved ones, and I ask that, Father, you would comfort them and restore us. In Jesus' name. We pray for our president. We pray for this rat's nest that is corruption to be identified, routed out, and removed. Father, shine your light on every last wicked official, every last person who has done what they shouldn't do, and that has hurt our country. Father, restore us to the glory that you intended. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. And now just some scriptures from Psalm 33, verses 18 through 22. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death, and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield, for our heart shall rejoice in him. because we have trusted in his holy name. Let your mercy, O Lord, be upon us, according as we hope in you. That's all for this report. Thank you all so much. I know it was a long one. I appreciate you hanging in there, and I will see you next time.